Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar where we're going to cover Microsoft tools that are available for us to determine and enhance security posture. Now, for those of you that don't know me, my name's Sylvain Fontaine. I'm part of the specialist team unit here at IT Cloud. I'm a technical specialist in modern work and security. So today we're going to cover Microsoft Secure Score, our built-in security analyzer, let's say, within 365. But we're also going to take a look at Microsoft's Zero Trust Assessment Tool. Gives us an opportunity to do some essential checks and to confirm that we have a strong security baseline. We're also going to look at Microsoft Security Assessment Tool. It helps us identify and address security risks, more of an on-prem approach to it. And we're also going to take a look at Microsoft's Cloud Adoption Security Review. Now, it helps us identify opportunities for critical security optimizations when we're thinking of migrating further workloads to Azure. So let's get right started on this webinar about Microsoft tools available to determine and enhance your security posture. Now, does Microsoft provide a tool to measure and improve the security posture across Microsoft 365? Well, I sort of already gave it away, and that's that Microsoft Secure Score that's built into the 365 Admin Center. Now, we use it for assessing current security because it gives us a snapshot of how secure our environment is at that moment in time. And it's live, it's dynamic, and it's based on existing configurations as well as existing services that are online and different settings that we have configured within that environment. It also provides us with improvements, recommendations. They're also prioritized to help us strengthen our defenses, such as enabling, let's say, multi-factor authentication or securing admin accounts. It also gives us the possibility of tracking our progress because we can monitor changes over time as we compare our initial secure score to our secure score now after having implemented those recommendations over time. And as well, it helps us support our compliance and insurance needs. If you have customers that need to prove that they've made improvements or that they're in the process of making improvements so they can obtain some cyber insurance, then this is the tool for that. So this is that initial dashboard that we see when we first look at our Microsoft Secure Score. So it covers 4 specific areas, that being identity, data, device, and apps. Now, if we dig a little deeper into our recommended actions, or what Microsoft recommends that we should consider implementing in our environment, then we're presented with these recommendations and in order of priority. And as well, it gives us an idea of if I implement this strategy, I can earn 5 points towards improving my overall score. So it really gives us an opportunity to increase our score as it's numerically based. It's a percentage, of what our percentage of adherence to security is at the moment, but how much we can improve it if we apply those recommendations. Well, let's go and take a look to see what it looks like. So if we go into our 365 Admin Center, we go on security, then we'll go and navigate into our secure score. So this is basically that screenshot of what we were seeing before. And then when we click on recommended actions, this is where we get those recommendations presented to us in the form of a list by priority. So we'll just wait for that information to be loaded in the interface. So by default, we see all of those 4 different categories, but let's say we wanted to concentrate for the time being on just the identity portion of things, then we could certainly filter just by identity. And that would give us an opportunity to at least address anything related to identity, anything identity verification, anything having to do, with those authentication mechanism, thinking of implementing conditional access, thinking of, imposing MFA, let's say, on all users. So here in this case, we do have recommendations based on conditional access because this tenant uses Microsoft 365 Business Premium. So if we look at, let's say, one of those recommendations, if we look at it, this is the one where we would enable conditional access policies to block legacy authentications. Now, it will actually tell us what service do we need, what needs to be licensed, what feature is needed to accomplish conditional access. Well, as I mentioned before, in our case, we need Microsoft Entra ID Premium P1, and we do meet that criteria because the tenant in question has Microsoft 365 Business Premium provisioned in it. So we could as well choose to focus on another category. We could choose to focus on devices, let's say, for example. And then we would be presented with recommendations relative to devices in this case, and about all things that we could think of trying to achieve, to maximize that security, to increase our security posture. So let's take a look now at our zero trust assessment tool. Now, this is what gives us that overview of those essential checks to confirm that we do have a strong security baseline. Now, we can ask ourselves, is there a tool from Microsoft that can help us evaluate how well the implementation of the zero trust security model framework is going? Because that is one of the foundations with Microsoft. It's that verify explicitly, use least privilege access, and assume breach. So those are the core components, the pillars that make up zero trust. They are at the core of what zero trust is. So instead of us believing that everything behind a corporate firewall is safe, the zero trust model assumes breach, verifies each request as though it originated from an uncontrolled network. In other words, every time someone requests access to an application, access to a resource, we're going to we're going to continuously validate those credentials. If they've already been submitted, then fine. We're still going to, revalidate those credentials. But if they're not, we're trying to access a different resource. Then, perhaps we might be asked to prove our identity once again. So the idea is to always authenticate and authorize based on all available data points. We also, that least privilege access, it's that just in time with just enough access. So the idea behind that is I'm only going to give you access to what you need at the moment for the time being, but I'm also going to not give you additional roles that you might not need at this time. So we should always keep that mindset that we only assigned necessary roles to users. Nothing says that we have to give global admin rights to every one that's administrating services within 365. If for example, we have an individual and his or her responsibilities are to manage the Exchange mail service, then in that case, we're only going to give that person the Exchange admin role. That way, they can fulfill those tasks and only have the privileges afforded to them to perform those tasks. It's always the idea behind that is always in case that we have a compromised identity, we don't want someone to gain access to areas of the platform, where they shouldn't be having access to at the moment. So the zero trust assessment tool helps organizations evaluate how well they're implementing that zero trust security model. It's that framework that assumes that no user or device should be trusted by default. Now, it helps us to assess your current security posture. It checks against the environment, against the zero trust principles like identities, endpoints, and data. It also gives us tailored recommendations based on your setup. And what that means is when we run this tool, it's being run against the environment as it stands at the moment, how it has been configured at that point in time. And from there, it gives us specific actions so we can strengthen our defenses. Now, we're also with this tool able to track progress, and we're going to see that it's very well done. Supports planning and communication because we have different tools at our disposal where we can build some documentation so we can talk to leadership and to stakeholders and present them with the state of the state of their environment at the moment and what we recommend doing, and as well we can keep them informed while we're making or implementing those recommendations. Now, we can use this zero trust assessment tool in two ways. One way is to run it using a PowerShell script, which is the one that I did for this session. So after I ran that PowerShell script on my environment, it produced me this report. So it tells me when the assessment was generated on, who generated it. Of course, I blacked out those details. It also gives you the full ID of the tenant in question. And here we have an overall graphical representation on, what was evaluated, what was enumerated when the PowerShell script ran. Now, this is the report that it produces. So it really gives us, this is just a screenshot of user and groups, and we're going to go in the interface in a minute and see what else is available. But it really has a nice graphical representation that we're able to see, where we're at, what has been started, what's been completed, what has not been started. So it really gives us that complete representation, of that security portrait within the environment. Now, as well, we can run it using the Excel tool. The Excel tool, however, is not dynamic in the sense that the only way that it's dynamic is if you, as an individual, every time you complete a task or you address one of the recommendations that we see here, once again, they're also put forth by priority, stage one, stage two, but you're also responsible to manually go and input the information in that Excel spreadsheet. Whereas the other tool, nothing prevents you from running it, once you've made some progress up to a certain point, nothing prevents you from running it again and just updating that graphical interface, that report. So let's go take a look at what the output looks like for that. So there's that report that's produced from running that PowerShell script for the Zero Trust assessment tool. Now, this is that screenshot that I took that was in here within this section of users and groups. And where I was saying that it's interactive because I can actually click here and I have a drop down. So right now it said not started, but I can, set it as being in planning, and then I can assign this to someone. I can set it up as a project. I can set it up, as something that needs to be addressed between myself and my technical team, or yourself, the MSP, and the customer, and where you can engage on that conversation, on how you would like to address this security recommendation. And as well, you can always change the status. And like I said, it's very complete. And whereas you're able to really track your progress by coming back to the report and making sure that you keep the information up to date. And like I mentioned, nothing prevents you from running the tool after you've made a certain number of corrective measures within the environment. The other thing that's interesting is on each one of these boxes, yes, I can change that status. But as well, these are all hyperlinks that brings me to documentation that I'm able to read up on. I can educate myself. I can see, how this would address that security need, what the procedure is, what I need to take into consideration in order to implement this recommendation. So let's take a look at Microsoft, the security assessment tool. Now, you may be wondering, is there a way to help organizations identify and address security risks across their IT environment? And here, the premise when we say across their IT environment is that we're talking about that on-prem approach where we're really looking at that physical infrastructure because we know that not everyone is in the cloud or not everyone is ready to be in the cloud. So there again you could um, be able to make an assessment on a customer's physical environment, and you could get an idea of where they're at as far as security in their environment. So the Microsoft Security Assessment Tool, it's a guided self-assessment. So what does that mean? That means that it's built on the format of a questionnaire where you have to answer questions, different sections, and within each sections there are subsections which opens different areas, where you need to answer, and as well there are subsections within there. Depending on if you answer yes on a certain section, there'll be further questions that you will, you have to provide further information in order to really create the most the most up to date or the most aware security assessment in that environment. So it's able to give us those that risk awareness, like I said, because it asks detailed questions and it builds a profile of the organization's business risks and current security practices. It helps us define that in-depth analysis, and we'll see that in the report. It measures how well the security layers are working together. As well, we can build some benchmarking because that's another tool that once again we can run multiple times. We can start with a baseline, which is what I did. And then we can, implement some of the recommendations. And then over time we can run it again 2, 3, 4 months down the road just to see where we're at with our security implementations. Now, it's really focused, as I mentioned, on that on-prem aspect. So it's really going to ask you and the customer to consider how people are using the infrastructure internally and how that internal infrastructure interacts with external entities. Do they have direct access to data within? Do they access databases within, or the customer themselves? That internal infrastructure. Do they in turn access external identities information? Do they pull information into their environment? Do their employees, that your customers' employees, that they access remotely resources internally, let's say from home or from on the road? So you're really able to, to really those interrogations, are really there through the questionnaire, and you can really answer all of those and really come up with a really full assessment of their infrastructure and how it's being accessed and used internally and how it interacts, like themselves with others or others with them externally. So here we have that business risks profile because that's the first step. So we define who the company is, we define how many users, we define how many servers, et cetera, et cetera. And we set up the preliminary environment where we talk about infrastructure, application security, operation security, people security, and the environment globally. Then we progress over to the actual assessment itself. and then we're asked to more specifically which within each one of those four categories. Let's say we take that infrastructure. So within that section, we have perimeter defense, authentication, management, and monitoring. And as I mentioned before, depending on how you answer some of these questions, it might lead you to further questions. Now, as well, you know, should you rush into it? Should we, hurry up to come up with a report as quickly as possible? Well, I would say probably not, because if you really want to have the fullest picture possible, then you're going to need to have answers, to most of the questions, or more questions, than not. So that's why you might not be able to do it, let's say, in one sitting with your customer. It might require you to revisit, the questionnaire itself, just to come up and answer some of these questions, to be able to really build that more accurate report. So once you're all done the assessment, once we go inside, we can look at the report. And this is the way when I ran the report, these are the results that I got for the business risk profile, and as well for the DIDI, which is the Defense In-Depth Index. So it really, permits you to see a picture. And as well, we actually have an interactive menu. And then if we click on scorecard, this is where it gets really interesting. So this is where we see, where we're at, where we stand in terms of, those different sections, and all those different subsections, like infrastructure, like perimeter defense. Like I indicated, I have antivirus on my desktop and on my servers. But at the moment, I don't have IDS, intrusion detecting system. I'm not doing any sort of explicit management on the wireless. I basically just have one, SSID, and everyone connects to it. There are no distinct, networks, no different VLANs or subnet, because, there again, my network is not segmented at the moment. So we're really able to, to see that picture, as well. That picture is only as accurate, obviously, as the information that we provided. So that's where it's very important to give it as much of, accurate information as possible. Now, we also get a prioritized action list, and it's very interesting, once again, from that report, set up through those priorities: high priority, medium, and low. And then once again, we have all those recommendations where, all of those might require you to sit down with the customer, read the documentation, and, figure out, is this an avenue that we want to go down? Is the customer interested? Or are you yourselves familiar with it? Do you need to educate yourself so you can better, communicate the importance of it to the customer? So, over time, once you start using the tool, you'll definitely be able to develop that expertise. So let's go look at what that report looks like. So let's go back in our assessment. So we'll just go and load it up. All right. So I'm just going to go back to the state where I was, because when I produced the report, this is how I'd answered these questions. So I just wanted to get back to my report. But as I was mentioning to you before, obviously, if I come up here, and then over time I learn some information, then obviously, it's going to want to regenerate a report, because the information now that I'm providing it has changed. So if I answer yes, like I mentioned before here, there'll be now some other questions, within this section about the firewall that I'm now going to have to answer. And it's like that, here again, if I answer yes here, I'm going to have this other requirement here to meet. But let's go back to my original question, and let's go look at that report. So this is that report that I was showing you before with that screenshot. So let's navigate into complete report. We'll wait for that to load up and then we'll go to our scorecard, which is what I was showing you before. So here we have, that section I was showing you before. Yes, I do have antivirus. I have it on my desktop. I have it on my servers. Yes, I do, back up, my data, but as well, this goes further down into all these other categories. Do I do background checks, on the staff before I hire them? So it's quite exhaustive. So it's not just necessarily, infrastructure, but like I said, it's who is using your infrastructure, and how do you make it available? So let's go back up here. It's really slow to navigate. So let's go to that prioritize action list, which is what I was showing you before. So here we have those recommendations. And as well, we have, we have them all listed by priority, but, there again, this is all built on the way I answered my questions. Let's say here in my business risk profile, which was that first step where I answered, what my infrastructure looked like. So obviously, like I said, if you go and make any changes to that questionnaire, you go and change, some of the answers to some of the questions, as we saw before, the report button disappears because obviously you will need, to generate a new report so you can get a new output because obviously your situation has changed. Well, let's take a look at Microsoft's Cloud Adoption Security Review. So this is the one that we should, consider when we're thinking of, migrating to Azure, when we want to start migrating further workloads into Azure. So the question we should be asking ourselves, is it possible for an organization to evaluate and strengthen the security of their Azure environment as they move to the cloud? Well, the question is yes, because we have, the Cloud Adoption Security Review, which is a tool that Microsoft puts in place for us. So once again, this is a self-assessment. So you will need to go through the questionnaire. And initially, I realize you might not have all the answers. So you answer, to the best of your abilities at that moment in time. But it lets you evaluate, the current security posture around key areas like access control, asset protection, security operations, governance. It provides you with that actionable guidance. It, has once again those recommendations where, and they're tailored in the sense that they're built, on the answers, the information that you provided the tool. And you're also able to do some progress tracking. So you're able over time to see, how we're moving, from a certain state of our security posture and how we've been able to improve it over time. And the whole idea behind that is that business alignment, because it ensures that your security practices are integrated with the business goal. And we're even able to plan resilience, into that as well. So this will require you to create an account at Learn in order to gain access to the tool. And here we see that the length of assessment, it says 120 minutes. Now, it is very exhaustive if you really choose all those different categories that are made available to you. There are six, from business alignment all the way to innovation security. So if you really choose all of those, then you'll have 34 pages of questions to answer. And even some of those, once again, depending on how you answer the initial question, it might be, might generate or open up some other questions that you will need to provide, information in order to answer it as accurately as possible. In my case, I only chose the access control interest section, and that way, and we'll take a look at that, what was produced in the end as far as a report. Now, here we see that, within that, those are the questions that I answered. Some of the preoccupations were, how I wanted, things to I wanted the output or some of the information that I have on hand, the answers that I was able to provide through to some of the questions themselves. So this is the overall picture that it painted for me. So, I ended up being moderate because, obviously, unfortunately, I didn't have the full picture of the environment. So I was able to answer partially some of the questions. So, which means that, I should really revisit, this customer's environment with them to try and come up with more accurate answers to all the questions. So I can really build, the best report possible. Now, it also comes with those recommendations. So we're actually able to improve upon our results. And we have those recommendations, once again listed in order of priority. So let's go take a look to see how that looks. All right. So this is what I was showing you. This was my output from my result. So if we go look in here, we'll go look at access control. And we'll go look here. So these are those recommendations. Now, as well in here, the nice thing is that once again, all of this is interactive, and I can click on this recommendation, and it will bring me to a documentation page where I can go and learn, about securing that, about fulfilling that requirement, and what it is that they have in mind, what is the idea behind this recommendation. So, once again, within Azure, we have the notion of virtual networks, just like we have on our physical networks. Nothing prevents us in Azure from segmenting our network as well. If we have, let's say, a platform as a service, we have an SQL server, or we have file servers, we have virtual machines, that are configured as infrastructure as a service. You know, Nothing says that everything has to coexist on the same subnet. We can separate things. In other words, we can do just like we do on a physical network, is I can create different subnets, go and put my servers in there, and only permit, certain devices to access certain servers using, to communicate, using certain ports. So, once again, nothing prevents me from securing those environment in that fashion. And as well, it's even scared as well using credentials because, once again, just because I'm sitting on that device, obviously, I still need to be authenticated to access that resource in Azure. So let's go back to our report. So this is that answer summary that I showed you before, but these were some of the original questions. So I wasn't able to, to answer all of them, but obviously, it is quite thorough in the sense that, it really permits you to really build, that report. Obviously, I ran it once. I called it baseline access control. So here we have the date and timestamp. And as well, if you run it multiple times, and obviously you'll have multiple reports. And here you'll see your milestone, your score history, in the sense that, this one produced an output or a result for myself of only 37%. But obviously, if I ran it again, I would get, different results because hopefully, I will have followed some of those recommendations. If I go on view guidance, here's my score where I scored, between here and the moderate. So obviously, if I followed more of those recommendations, my score would improve, and then I would actually be able to see, that milestone history within that graph, so that you'd be able to show the customer, hey, things are improving. We've taken the time, we've sat down, we've improved the security posture, we followed the recommendations, we've started implementing additional security measures, and things are working because our reports are showing that we're improving the security overall. So I decided to to make a little table to describe all of those four tools. Now, the reason why I chose those is because the Microsoft Secure Score is already built in to Microsoft 365. And obviously, that one is very easy to access. It's built right in there. There are no, additional actions. Nothing else needs to be done in order to access it. And the zero trust assessment tool, that's the one that requires you to run the PowerShell script or follow it along with the Excel sheet. But I would recommend running that PowerShell script because you get that output where you're able to create that visual picture with all those different sections and with all those different areas within sections that need to be addressed. And we have the Microsoft Security Assessment Tool. It is a tool that needs to be installed, on a machine, and then you run it from there. And that's once again, it's a self-assessment that you need to answer those questions yourself. There again, all of these tools, nothing prevents you, as well as the Cloud Adoption Security Review, for to build those Azure landing zones. So what do we mean by an Azure landing zone? We mean an area where we're going to make services available so that here we need to think about how we want to secure that area. So as I was mentioning, nothing prevents you from running these three tools, periodically more than once. By all means, do so. Where you can actually see your progression over time. You can show your customers, that things are improving in their environment. So that concludes today's presentation. So as I was mentioning before, I chose the Microsoft 365 Secure Score because it's built in. I chose the other tool because it really, talks about that zero trust approach from Microsoft. I chose the Microsoft Assessment Tool because, it lends itself to on-prem infrastructures, and I chose the Cloud Adoption Security Review because it lends itself to Azure. So I was trying to, cover as many bases as possible. We have our default 365 cloud approach. And then we have that zero trust notion, that framework. Then, we have the physical on-prem infrastructure approach, and then we have the Azure infrastructure cloud approach. So I also would like to bring to your attention an upcoming training following this session tomorrow. We're going to do an IT Cloud Academy training. It's called Building a Managed Security Services Business. And it's focused on securing small and medium-sized businesses, SMBs, using Microsoft 365 Business Premium. So this is using a document called Enhancing Security with Microsoft 365 Business, a hands-on effective guide. Now, this guide is put together by the Managed Security Services team at Microsoft. So it goes beyond the tools that we saw today. It really builds, once again, that framework built around Microsoft 365 Business Premium, but it's really there to help you build a managed security services business. And the approach is designed to secure those SMB customers using Microsoft Business Premium. So the guide is to be used with an accompanying SMB security checklist. So that way you can actually, over time, once again, show the customer the progression, so which areas have been addressed. And these recommendations are also presented to you by priority. And that guide deals with identity protection, email and apps protection, endpoint enrollment, endpoint protection, data protection, securing AI. And then we come back and we talk about advanced identity protection and advanced email and apps protection. So it's a very nice tool. I don't think many people know of its existence, but it's very well made, very well structured. And once again, it provides a bunch of information. It's really that framework on how to secure those SMB environments using Microsoft 365 Business Premium. It's interactive. The document itself has a whole bunch of links. It links you to documentation so you can go and read up on things. So, like I said, it's a very well done, for those SMB customers where we want to secure their environments, but more importantly, it can help you transform your practice. You can build a security services business. And as well, we have another upcoming webinar. This one is on AvePoint Opus. Now, as we call it, it's entitled The Key to Microsoft 365 Data Storage Optimization and Quality. So if come and join us on this webinar and discover how AvePoint Opus is is putting forth a revolution in data management in Microsoft 365. With advanced tools for storage optimization, data quality, AvePoint Opus enables businesses to maximize the efficiency of their 365 environment. Now, this innovative solution offers in-depth data analysis, identifies redundancies and efficiencies, and proposes intelligent storage strategies. So the whole idea behind this is to improve data quality, and AvePoint Opus does that for us because it helps us ensure better compliance. It reduces risks and it enhances decision making. So if you really, I think you should really take it upon yourselves, if you can afford the time, to join us to explore the key features and benefits of this essential solution for any organization looking to get the most out of Microsoft 365. And as well, for those of you that are not aware of it, Microsoft has put together a service. It's called Teammate. So Teammate is your technical ally. So Teammate is a service put together where we want to help you implement those solutions, those security solutions, or it could be Teams IP telephony. Regardless, we want to help you get familiar with those solutions, how to implement them, how to integrate them in your customers' environments. And the whole premise behind this is that expertise transfer. We really want to share that knowledge with you and your team, and we want you to become more self-sufficient. We want to help you become more comfortable, more knowledgeable about these solutions so that you can think of, implementing them, to more and more customers over time. Now, here we have our services catalog as it stands at the moment, but if you find that you have a project or you want to implement a solution that does not fall within one of those four services at the moment, then by all means use the proof of concept tile, and book a meeting with the Teammate service, and share what your intentions are, share what you're looking into, what project you're envisioning putting in place at one of your customers. As well, IT Cloud has put together a Copilot Champions community. So what is the Copilot Champions community? Well, it's a place, it's an opportunity for people to come together, for people to come and exchange, to share information, to gain knowledge on what it is possible to do with Copilot, what is Copilot. And as well, one Friday every month, we have what we call our Copilot Fridays, where we host live events, where people all come in live and exchange, and we'll present as well. We'll have some IT Cloud partners, come and present some of their success stories, what solutions they've been able to implement with their customers, how their customers are now using Copilot to become more productive on a day-to-day basis. So it's really a convenient area, and as well, there's a bunch of documentations. You're able as well to see past sessions, to see what people have shared within the community. So I would suggest, if you're interested in Copilot, then by all means, register to the community. Yes, IT Cloud has a channel on YouTube, as well as the webinar that, we're all present in today will also be made available on our YouTube channel, as well as past webinars. And, they vary in subjects, so don't hesitate. Go and peruse of all the webinars that we've made available to you so far. And we would ask that you would at least, do a like and share those webinars, because at the end of the day, we really want to promote, mostly security solutions, but as well the webinars talk about new products, new offerings, and their advantages that they can bring to your customers. And as well, within our specialist teams unit, we have a booking service. So if any of you wish to discuss, in my case, it's security, but my colleagues as well, it could be Windows 365, Azure Virtual Desktop, it could be Copilot. Don't hesitate. Book a call, book a meeting with us, and we can talk about different solutions. The whole idea behind the specialist team unit is to make you aware of some of the products, or if you yourself have become aware of a product, then by all means we can discuss it and we can talk about, is this the best solution for your customer? Is this the best solution at the moment? Or is this, the solution that you should be thinking of integrating within your customer's operations? Or is it a solution that, I can integrate with existing services as well? So we're really there to recommend, the best way forward, because we want to make sure that you buy the best services, or that you consider buying the best services possible for your customers. So as always, we would really like it if you would evaluate this webinar, because the purpose of the evaluation is to, we want to understand if the session was useful to you, but it also allows you to provide some unshared feedback that you weren't able to do during the presentation. You could do so at a later moment after you've had time to reflect. But most of all, it really helps us understand how we can improve our webinars in the future, because we're always about delivering the best value for you, our IT Cloud partners, and we want to make sure that, we're delivering the best product available to you. Are there any questions in the chat? Does anyone have any questions that they would like answered? Well, on that note, I will say thank you. So thank you for being with us today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and for being with us. And thank you for joining us. And please don't hesitate. If you have any questions, you can either call us or email us. We're always here, ready to listen to your interrogations, to interact with our partners. Don't hesitate to call us. That's what we're here for. On that note, thank you, and we'll see you in the next one.